What's up everybody, welcome to another episode of Tekin Builds. I'm Ty Campbell and today we are going to put some electronics in a brand new ProLine Pro MT 4x4 that I just received in the mail. This is the special edition Pro MT 4x4, so it is a pre-built roller, includes everything you need other than your electronics to get this thing running. So it's got the ambush body with the trail cage, it's got wheels and tires already pre-mounted up, so really all we have to do is throw electronics in this thing, throw some paint on that body, and then we can take it outside and start bashing on it. I also got a couple option parts. We got the aluminum hub adapters for our wheels because we're gonna throw some big power at this truck. I want it to just be insanely fast. We're also gonna put sand paw paddle tires on it because there is snow on the ground, and sand tires, snow, gonna be a lot of fun. For electronics, we're gonna throw an RX4 element-proof speed control in there. We're also gonna have an element-proof ROC412 HD. It is a 2300 kV motor, and we're gonna run this system on 4S, so this thing is gonna be peppy. For a servo, we're gonna go with a Tekin T360 steering servo. We don't need it to be real fast in a truck like this because we're not racing on the track. We just want torque so we can swing those big 2.8 tires around. So let's take a look at what's in our box, and then we will get to throwing some electronics in this thing, paint up our body, and we'll take this thing out and thrash it. So I'll be honest, I was super excited when this thing showed up. I already opened it up. Let's check out what we got in here. Looks like some pieces of our trail cage. A couple other parts. Got the body. Our pre-mounted Badlands. So we got some Badlands mounted on F11 black wheels. And our chassis. Look at that thing. Just looks like it is ready for some outside thrashing. And this thing is stout. It's like we got a 3mm aluminum chassis plate. This thing is a lot like a mini 8 scale, like little short course truck. Everything is just super thick. It's got pillow ball front suspension. Look at how thick these upper and lower A-arms are. This thing is just built to last, and we are definitely gonna put it through its paces. Looks like we got a center differential, so 3 fluid-filled gear diffs in this thing, lots of tuning options. We've got aluminum bodied big bore shocks on here, and they feel like they've got a pretty good oil weight in them right now. We'll have to check out the manual and see what's in there just so we know where we're starting at. We got the ProLine thumb nut washers for the body, so these are gonna keep everything nice and secure on there. We don't have any pins to mess with. Nice. Well, this thing looks really awesome. I can tell it's gonna just take a beating and keep on trucking. Let's get our electronics out. We'll start putting some stuff in here. We'll get our wheels and tires on, and then we'll get that body painted up real quick. We'll take it outside and see what it's made of. So the first part we're going to throw in our Pro MT 4x4 is the ROC412 HD brushless motor. This is a sensored motor. It is part of our element-proof line, so it can withstand splashes and snow, mud, ice, whatever you want to throw at it. This is the longer 550 can version of this motor, thus the HD moniker on the end. So you can see this is longer than your standard. Here is a normal ROC412 3100 kV to compare. So you can see that they are about 10mm different from each other. It has a longer stack internally and a longer rotor, so all of that equates to more torque and more power. Each element-proof motor comes with a 200mm jacketed sensor harness, tube of dielectric grease for sealing up the sensor ports to protect them from water, as well as the sensor wire clip to secure it to the back of the motor. Now the biggest differences between these two motors is obviously the length and then the shaft size. The ROC412 has a 1/8 inch shaft, so it's going to fit your normal 10 scale pinions. The ROC HD has a 5mm shaft, so it's going to fit the 32 pitch and the Mod 1 pinions that have the bigger 5mm pass-through. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, this is a 2300 kV motor. We're going to run this on 4-cell, so this thing should be close to 8-scale buggy, 8-scale truggy top speed, hopefully somewhere in the high 30s to low 40s, and just gobs of torque. So that's everything that comes with the ROC412 HD. Let's get the screws out of our kit real quick and we'll mount it in that motor mount. You can see these guys right here. These are actually keyed, and these are what you use to adjust your gear mesh. There's settings in the manual, and there are 4 sets of these included for 4 different size pinions. So that makes setting your mesh extremely easy, and it is not going to move. So now we've got our motor mount. We're gonna get our ROC412 HD ready, put that sensor harness on because it's easier to do when it's out of the truck. We'll throw it into our motor mount right here, get our pinion on, we'll mount it back up in the truck, and because of those nifty little spacers, our gear mesh will be preset. So let's get her done. Prepping our motor to go in our truck is just a few easy steps. First being the sensor port. We want to take that tube of dielectric grease and paste it on in there. Don't be shy with it. This is going to help shield those pins from any water. Then we're going to put our sensor harness on. Use that little clip on the back. That'll just keep the harness from wanting to come out, and it secures it to the back of the motor. Now we're going to drop our motor mount onto our motor. The kit includes some countersink M3 screws, so use these, clock your motor so the tabs are pointing towards the middle of the vehicle just to keep the wires away from the outside of the truck, and tighten them down. Check this out. When I was digging through the bags to get the pinion out for the kit, I found this little guy and I was like, what in the heck is this? But then as I was looking at my non-HD ROC412, I knew exactly what this was. This is an adapter to change your 1/8" shaft to a 5mm shaft. So you can see this fits right here, and then your pinion gear slides right over it. You line all that up, crank your set screw down, and you can fit the 5mm pinion on an 1/8" shaft. So that is super cool. So with our motor and our motor mount, we're gonna mount it in the Proline truck. This can be a little bit tricky. Just hold the entire mount by the motor, line those screw holes up, and then make sure you key those little keys the right direction so that your motor mesh will be preset. Now we can slide our pinion on, line it up with the spur gear as best you can, put a little Loctite on that grub screw and tighten it down. I also like to always check the mesh. This is set perfectly thanks to those keys. The spur gear should rock back and forth just a little bit. Our motor is in and sitting pretty. The pinion and spur mesh is perfect thanks to those handy little inserts on the bottom of our chassis that secure our motor mount. Now we're gonna throw our RX4 in. We'll solder everything up. We'll go over some of the tips and tricks, tools that I use to solder. We'll get everything wired, we'll power this thing up, and then we'll set our 360 servo in there and set that up once we have power in our truck. So let's get our RX4 out and we'll mount it up in our truck. Here we go, Ty's tools of the trade for soldering. So obviously we're gonna need a soldering iron. I have a trusty old Hakko 936. It's a 65 watt soldering iron, so it's plenty powerful. And it has a medium-sized chisel tip so that we can effectively heat up our wires and our motor tabs and ESC posts. The solder I like to use is made by Kester. It is a rosin core lead solder. It's a 6040, and it is the Kester 44 if you're looking to get yourself a spool. I also have this little guy. This is called the Jigs Up. This is awesome for holding anything you're trying to solder. It's like an extra set of hands. Very handy little tool. Got needle nose pliers for holding our wires close to our solder joints so we don't burn our fingertips. Cutters for cutting our wires to length. Wire strippers so that we can strip the ends off to expose the strands. We've got Tekin 12 gauge black wire. We're gonna wire the whole truck up in black so it's in stealth mode. And our RX4 speed control. Here's everything that is included with our RX4. You get the wire pack, which has 3 9-inch lengths of 12 gauge. You get the 3rd channel connection wire, which goes from the data port on the ESC to your receiver. It also plugs your Hotwire 2.0 straight into your controller for easy programming. User manual, more dielectric grease. This is just a little note that says you need to update your hot wire if you haven't in a while so it'll connect. This is how to connect it to your hot wire. Fan pack with necessary hardware to mount the fan. There are also screws in there to use the bolt pattern on the bottom of the ESC to mount it to an electronics plate. And some Tekin decals. So let's find a spot for this in our truck. We're going to mount it right behind our motor, and then we will work on some soldering tips. Real quick before we stick this in our truck, just because it's easier and we're not going to accidentally melt anything with our soldering iron, we're going to tin the posts on our RX4. This is going to prepare them to accept our wires when we tin those in a sec, and it just makes bonding everything a lot easier. So to tin our wires, you want to have a nice clean iron tip. Use a wet sponge on the soldering station. You're going to put a little bit of solder on that tip and then apply heat to the post. And then you're going to feed a little bit of solder into that solder pocket on the RX4. Not too much, we just want a little bit so that it is ready, and that'll make soldering a lot easier when we put our wires on. So I got about a 2-inch strip of double-sided tape on the bottom of our RX4. We're going to mount it right here behind our ROC412 HD direct to the chassis plate, and there are some clips on the inside of this mudguard that secure the receiver wire, and we'll tuck our receiver right up there in front of the pinion. Our on-off switch, we actually designed this case so that the switch keys up here into the top of the RX4, you can use a little bit of CA or a little piece of double-sided tape to secure that switch right here to the fan shroud. I took the mudguard off the side of our chassis just so you could more clearly see what I'm trying to show you. Our posts are already tinned up. We're going to do the same thing on our motor tabs, and then we'll start getting our wires done. So same procedure here. You want to have a little bit of solder on your iron so it transfers to the motor tab, and then heat this guy up, put a little bit of solder on it, just enough to where it is tinned to accept our wires. First thing we need to do is strip the end of our wire so that we can make our first connection. Now we're going to place it in our jig so that we don't burn our fingers. And just like we did on the motor posts and ESC posts, we're going to tin this. So you want to get some solder to flow into those strands. You don't need too much, and you don't need to heat it for too long. So we're going to do our C phase post first, closest to the motor right here. So we've got our tinned post and our tinned wire. I like to heat the post up first. You'll see it flow. Heat up this wire just a tad. Bring them both together. Apply heat to both. And they should flow right together in about 2 to 3 seconds. If you can't hold it this close to your solder joint, it's too hot, you need to start over, let that one cool off, and work on a different one. Everything is all soldered up and looking good. I'm gonna double check that I got the polarity on the plugs right. That is a big mistake that you do not want to make because there is no reverse polarity protection in our controllers. So we'll verify plus to plus, minus to minus. Looks pretty good. Plug this in. Now I already bound my radio and receiver, so we're gonna turn this on and do a radio calibration. So to do a radio calibrate, we're just going to press and hold mode. This is going to look for neutral first, and it found it, so then we're going to pull and hold full throttle. we've got full throttle, so now we're going to push and hold full brake. Calibration is done. There is a lot of drag brake in this ESC right now, and I don't have the sensor wire hooked up, so we're gonna squeegee a bunch of that dielectric grease into the sensor port, plug the sensor harness in, and then I'll show you how to adjust the drag brake and set your voltage cutoff for your appropriate batteries. Okay, so now we're going to adjust our drag brake because this has drag brake in it by default. So we're going to press mode one time. That's the dB setting. Increment to enter it. There's 50% set. So we're going to keep pressing this and run it all the way around until the far left LED is lit. That's 0 drag brake. Now to do our voltage cutoff, we press mode to get up to VC. Right now it is set for 2S by default. We're going to go to 4. That is 4S. You can also set this through the hot wire with the preset settings, and then there is an option to adjust your voltage cutoff per cell. So say you wanted to cut off at 3.2 per cell, that is actually the default setting so that we protect your cells from over discharging. You can choose the cell cutoff that you want to have. Well, that is the wiring. Everything is nice and tight. We just need to secure our on-off switch before we get ready to go out and drive. We're gonna drop our servo in now, route the wire, plug it into our receiver, and then we'll show you how to set that up. And then I'll throw that mud guard back on and we will have a runner. Well, we're in the home stretch of getting electronics installed in our truck. The last thing we need to do is put on our 360 servo. This is a 2S capable servo. The T360 means that you can expect about 360 ounces of torque at 6 volts. We're gonna run this on our RX4's high voltage BEC, so you can expect more around 415 ounces of torque. So let's drop this in our truck real quick. We're gonna use the 20mm crowbar arm that comes with the servo. It is a dual clamping design. It is very tough. It should be perfect for a truck like this. We'll get this installed, we'll set it up real quick, we'll have a runner. First order of business is to drop the servo into this aluminum collar. This is part of the servo mount setup. Screw these 2 screws on the outside into the little plastic mount piece. Fish our servo wire through the center. Make sure that it's clear of any moving parts like the drive shaft. We don't want it tangled up in there. Now we can screw the whole servo mount assembly down with the 4M3 screws that hold it in. With our crowbar on our steering link, we are going to turn our radio on, make sure the servo is centered, and then we will pop that crowbar onto the splines. Get it close to center, doesn't have to be perfect, we can trim it on the radio, and we can also trim it through the hot wire. Then we'll tighten down the 2 clamping screws on the outside, followed by the spline screw. I'm gonna power the system back on, and we're gonna check our servo throws and our direction. And my direction was backwards, so I went into my radio and reversed it on the steering channel. You can also reverse it through the hot wire so you don't have to mess with your radio. Now we're gonna check our endpoints. So we're gonna turn full lock to one direction and see if we're binding, and if it is, we're gonna back it off on our radio. Again, you can also set the endpoints on the hot wire, and this program's permanent endpoints, so your 100% on your radio will not go any higher than your programmed endpoint in the hot wire software. This is to protect the servo from having to work too hard and pull more current than it needs to do its job. Power it down, and this thing is ready to run now. So we got all the electronics in our Pro MT 4x4 installed. We are basically set up to go out and run. Now we got to put our wheels and tires on, and we'll get that body finished, and we'll take this thing out and bash on it a bit. Hope you enjoyed the video and learned a thing or two about installing Tekin electronics. That process is virtually the same for any chassis that you're going to want to throw our gear in, and same thing with our speed controls and servos. All the setup across the board is going to be the same, so you can apply what I showed here to any other speed control or servo that we manufacture. Be sure to like the video before you head out, click that share button so you can share it with all your buds, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode of this truck when we actually take it outside. And go check out our UMG 10 build. That is another one that is in process right now. Lots of cool stuff on the Tekin Builds playlist. I'm Ty Campbell, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.